Alright, so let's get into character building. One of the questions on my live stream video was, how do you make your characters? How do you choose what you want to use? How do you make that decision? So on and so forth. So the first thing, whether you make your own campaign or like what I'm going to do, I am going to use a campaign module, and I want to play out of this Princes of Apocalypse, which is really the Temple of Elemental Evil. Is read through it, and don't read it and spoil it for yourself, but get a good understanding of what you're getting into, and it's going to give you a lot better information to arm yourself with how to make your characters, to make it really a fun gaming experience, and not one of those as you go through the game and you get to a point to where you kind of realize maybe you had the wrong character for the I don't want to say that. There's really no such thing as a wrong character. There really isn't. But perhaps maybe that adventure you're playing, whether it involves, you know, a high amount of magics, no magics, whatever the dynamics of that particular gaming session that you're doing, you kind of regret choosing the character that you have, and you wish you would have went with the other one. So that's the first thing I'm going to say is, whatever material you're playing, really skim through it, get a good idea of what you're kind of getting into and what you're dealing with. So what I personally like to do, and I found that this works easy for me, particularly with Dungeons and Dragons. So if I skip over the classes to begin with, the first thing I do, and just like the book suggests, it's really an easier way to do it, is select the race you want to play first. That's the, I find, in my opinion, gives me more options, gives me the ability to really sit down and think about what kind of character I want, how to flesh them out, and really make a cool gaming experience for me. Now, typically, I've always either played a half-elf or an elf. Reading through that book, it did mention about Drow Elf in there, and which kind of made me think, it's like, well, wait a minute, that would give me an advantage, because in here, it does give you the option to play a Drow Elf. But even though I would have an increasement to my charisma score, I would have superior dark vision, the only bad thing is I'd have sunlight sensitivity, I would have access to Drow magic. If you've ever played any type of elf character classes, you understand that not all of them, but it's kind of cool. It goes back to first edition. Actually, basic edition is where when you played the elf, not only could you use melee weapons, you could also wield magic as well. And you get that in this as well with the Drow weapon training. I guess where I'm going with all of this, even though I like this, and I think one of my characters is going to be a Drow, I don't want my whole party to be a Drow. And the reason why is I think it's going to create more problems, particularly later on in the game, considering the fact that even in this particular game setting, they're considered still evil, and well, they're the enemy. So I think having a whole entire group of Drow might be a bad idea. It could be a really good recipe for a total party kill. So I'm going to pencil that in right there. So one, I'm going to have Drow Elf. And I kind of want to, at this point, I've always played particular character classes, and I talked about this in my last video, particularly because I've used them a lot. I know how to tweak the ability scores and stuff like that to make them work very easily. And game system to game system, it's very easy to use them to demonstrate for a video. But I think with this, I'm going to shake it up. I'm gonna do something different and start doing some different choices to see how things work out. One of the classes that I don't use very often, and I think I'm going to use for this one, is a Halfling. But the cool thing is, Halflings do get some pretty cool bonuses to them that I think is overlooked. And like I said, it really goes back into the type of gaming you're doing. If you're playing the type of game where you just want to kick the door in and loot the treasure and all that, and you're just basically dungeon delving, and you're really not... Basically, you're just doing, I'm going to say like 4 Against Darkness type of gaming, where you got the graph paper, you're just going through the dungeon, kicking the doors in and all that. Yeah, you know, at that point, you might want to, you know, use something like a half orc and make it into a barbarian and get all those, you know, huge amount of hit points and strength, because you're going to need it to keep that type of gaming going and keep everybody from getting killed. But with this, because I'm playing out of this, and this is very story driven, I think I'm going to go with the Halfling. Cool thing about the Halfling is my ability score increases, so your dex score increases by 2. That is cool. Age. A Halfling reaches adulthood at the age of 20 and generally lives into the middle of his or her 2nd century. So I guess I should put this out there. One of the things with my RPGs I really don't focus a lot on is the age. That's been kind of like one of those weird things about RPG systems to me, and I know it's put in there for realism, I guess you could say. A lot of people want that. Me, personally, I don't use it. It just seems irrelevant to me. They're heroes. They're supposed to be heroic. That's the thing about them. They are like cut from a different fabric of cloth to make them who they are, to be able to take on these quests or whatever, however you want to refer to them, adventures or whatever. So yeah, age is one of those things I really don't use in my RPGs a whole lot. So alignment, most halflings are lawful good. As a rule, they are good-hearted and kind, hate to see others in pain, and have no tolerance for oppression. They are also very orderly and traditional, leaning heavily on the support of their community and the comfort of their old ways. So basically, I think you can read between the lines on this one. Basically, what they're saying is to avoid copyright infringement, a halfling is a hobbit, basically. The size, halflings average about 3 feet tall and weigh about 40 pounds. Your size is small. So I'm already thinking a halfling would probably make a good thief, or a rogue, however you want to look at it. And but that's kind of very cliche, so I might have something else I might want to do with that. Anyways, your base walking speed is 25 feet. Lucky, when you roll a 1 on a d20 for an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the die and must use the new roll. That's pretty cool. That's one thing I kind of do like. So they have that element of, well, luck to them, which I think I'm going to try halfling. The other thing that they offer is they're brave. You have advantage on saving throws against being frightened, and halfling nimbleness. You can move through the space of any creature that is of a size larger than yours. And then, of course, it goes into languages, sub-races. So, let me, sorry if you guys heard that. My wife is scolding one of the dogs. The two main kinds of halfling are Lightfoot and Stout, and more likely closely related families than true subraces. Choose one of the subraces. Okay, so this is, if you're not familiar with 5th edition and you've played older editions, what I'm talking about here might seem a little weird to you, and that's okay. This is a cool thing that D&D has done, and I kind of like this. They do sub-races, so by choosing a sub-race, and they first, where they really, Wizards of the Coast started utilizing this, that I personally noticed, was in the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms campaign setting, to where when you chose a race, you had different sub-races, and depending on that sub-race, you got bonuses to your abilities, which was kind of cool. So it really helped, it really did help flesh out the world, if you will, for the fact that you didn't see that in the main core rule book, but you were able to use that in that campaign setting, and it made the campaign setting seem very unique and real, if you will. But so as a Lightfoot, your charisma score increases by 1, and then you have naturally stealthy. You can attempt to hide even when you are obstructed only by a creature that is at least one size larger than you. Or Stout, as a Stout Halfling, you are hardier than average and you have some resistance to poison. Some say that Stouts have Dwarven blood. In the Forgotten Realms, these Halflings are called Stronghearts, and they are most common in the South. Ability score increases. Your Constitution score increases by 1. I like that. Stout resilience, you have advantage on saving throws against poison, and you have a resistance against poison damage. So for me, this is going to be a no-brainer. I'm going to go with a Halfling Stout. So my second character will be Halfling Stout. And so I have one more to choose from. I don't mind playing the human race too much out of D&D. You know, every single game system, they seem to be pretty neutral to where you really don't get any bonuses or penalties or anything because you're human and all that. But just to me, it just kind of seems like if I use a human, I'd like to do an all-human campaign and keep everything kind of balanced. If I'm using different races, I like to stick with different races. So, I have the Dragonborn. I haven't really done much with the Dragonborn yet. They're just kind of weird looking, and I don't know, maybe I'm gonna have to think about that one for a minute. I'm gonna go back through my options and see what I have. So I'm gonna be doing a Drow Elf, a Halfling, don't know if I want to introduce a dwarf or not. Typically, dwarfs and the Drow Elf have always been mortal enemies. But that would be a good starting point, particularly if you're familiar with this guy, Drizzt Erden, and I could use a jump-off story point point like his to explain how the Drow Elf came about being in this certain adventure party and not being just hideously evil. I think that's what I'm going to do. So I think my third one's going to be a dwarf. Okay, so I got that down. So now I'm going to want to look at my... So the dwarf really quick, I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. The ability score that increases as the constitution increases by 2. The alignment, most dwarves are lawful, believing firmly, and they're mostly lawful good. Their size, well, they're dwarves. They're between 4 to 5 feet tall, weigh about 150 pounds. Their base walking speed is 25 feet. They have dark vision because they're accustomed to living underground, so they can see 60 feet in darkness or dim light. They have Dwarven resilience, which means you have advantage on saving throws against poison. I'll get into that a little bit later, so don't worry about the advantage as we get into it and start playing the game. We'll explain advantage. Dwarven combat training, you are proficient with the battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and warhammer. Yeah. Tool proficiency, you gain proficiency with artisan tools of your choice, smith tools, brewer's supplies, or mason's tools. That is very cool. Stone cutting, whenever you make an intelligence or history check related to the origin of stonework, you are considered to be proficient in the history skill. So basically, if you're not familiar with that, what stone cutting basically means is if you're a dwarf, just because of your heritage, basically, you're able to look at stonework and be able to give a very highly educated guess as to who created it, approximately its age. You're also able to look at it to a certain extent, be able to detect if there's things such as traps or dangerous areas. It's just a cool little trait that they get. It's kind of cool. I do like that. Languages, subraces. There are 2 main subraces of dwarves that populate the world of D&D, hill dwarves and mountain dwarves. So let's see what's the difference between these are. So the hill dwarf, my wisdom score increases by 1 and I get dwarven toughness, which means your hit point maximum increases by 1 and it increases by 1 every time you gain a level. That's pretty cool. So I gain 1 extra HP for every level I gain. The mountain dwarf, my ability score, my strength increases by 2 and I have dwarven armor training. You are proficient with light and medium armor. I like how they do this. So obviously, if you're going to make a cleric character, you'd go with the hill dwarf because basically your wisdom score is increased by 1. And you get the extra hit points every level. If you're going to go with a different type of fighting class, you're going to want to go with the mountain dwarf because your strength score is increased by 2 and you automatically start with armor proficiency. So I think I'm going to go with the mountain dwarf. Okay. So that's down. I chose my 3 characters. I got the 3 different character races that I want to play with this time. And now I'm going to move over to classes. And let's see what I want to include into my game system here. So, and as I said in my last video, there's 2 things I think every single RPG game that I've ever played that I always focus on. One is having a fighting class, somebody that can keep the party safe, that's proficient with weapons and armor, basically the tank. And then typically I have a healing and or magic using type of race, whatever that may be. So with that in mind, let's go through and see what I want to do. So, Barbarian, a fierce warrior, primitive background who can enter a battle rage. That would actually work very well with my Dwarf. But I'm not, I have to think about that one. I also have my Drow Elf, and how I want to go with my Drow Elf. I think for the fact that just by their very nature the Drow Elf have access to magic to begin with, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to I was thinking of a sorcerer, but the thing about the sorcerers, they can only use light type of weapons, whereas a warlock, on the other hand, a wielder of magic that is derived from a bargain with an extraplanar entity, they can use light armor and simple weapons. I think I'm going to go that route with him. So he's going to be a Drow Elf warlock. I think that's going to be interesting. I have my halfling as well. And I don't know how well my halfling might work out as being the tank. But I don't want to... I gotta think about this one for a moment. I think the wise thing to do is to use the Mountain Dwarf as my tank. I know it's very cliche and kind of cookie cutout. I mean, that's what D&D is. It's a cookie cutout system. It's a cool cookie cutout system, but it's a cookie cutout system. And I don't think he would make a fierce warrior of a primitive background who can enter battle rage. Well, that might work. And I think that's what I'm going to do with him. He's going to be a barbarian. Now, I got one class left to choose here, which I'm going to save for my halfling. And I'm going to pick something I normally don't use a whole lot. I already have a magic user. I'm going to have a warlock in my party, so I don't really want to go towards another magic. And the reason why I don't, when you play solo, I have found that if you have more than one magic user in your party at a time, things can get kind of clunky and run. I don't want to say clunky. That's not the right word for it. It can get drawn out and confusing with the spells, particularly if you have two characters that are casting spells and keeping track of range, turn duration, effects, saving throw, all those matrices that go into it. That's why I typically keep it to a minimum of one, unless I see that there's a need maybe for another magical class, and then I'll add it into the story later on and create another character and bring them in. But for right now, I think I'm just going to keep it as the warlock. You know what? I've never used bards very often. A bard has always been kind of like one of those character classes where it's been like, okay, it's a bard, the guy sings and dances. Music and magic in the worlds of D&D, words and music are not just vibrations of air, but vocalization with power on their own. Bard is a master of song. But, okay, I see that. Spell casting, bardic inspiration. You can inspire others throughout stirring words of music. To do so, use a bonus action of your turn to choose one creature other than yourself within 60 feet of you. You can hear that creatures gain 1 bardic inspiration die 1d6. Once within the next 10 minutes, the creature can roll the die and add the number rolled to one ability check, attack roll, or saving throw it makes. The creature can wait until... Okay, I think I see how... What the heck? Something new. So we're going to have a halfling stout bard. Okay, so... real basics. I've got my races. I've got the class that I want to use for them. At this point, how do I want to do this? Why not just leave it up to the luck of the die? So I'm going to roll a single die here to see what my starting equipment's going to be like. A 1 through a 2. They're going to be really, really poor type, like maybe padded armor and a rusty dagger type of deal. 3 through a 4, they're going to have either a decent piece of armor and an old weapon, or vice versa, a really decent weapon and an old piece of armor. And 5 through 6, they're going to start out with really decent weapons, decent maybe leather armor. Nothing too fancy out of the gate. So let's see how this is going to go, because I don't know how it's going to go. Let me see what I roll. A 5. Alright, well, hey. So, let me see what my starting funds are going to be. Actually, I could use the 5. Why don't I just do that? We'll say 5d4. How does that sound to start out? Sounds good to me. Wow. So I'm gonna say, let's just keep it simple. Might as well just make it an even 300. So my starting goal is going to be 300 for me to outfit my characters with. So that ought to be very, very, very interesting. Now, I got the basic template down here. Let's move on to the next thing, which is going to be the backing story. Okay, so I had my characters all rolled up. I did that over the week. So I didn't film any of that because, you know, generally when I'm creating characters, I'm either watching something on Netflix in the background or YouTube or listening to music or something like that. And we all know how YouTube is about that. So it's one of those things that's just big no-no and you can't do it. So I don't have that process here, which I really don't think it'd be that interesting. I'd just be rolling dice and writing down abilities, things like that. But so I wanted to explain before I start what I'm doing and what basically how I am doing this solo. Well, I guess that's just an easy way to do that. Okay, so first thing I do with my characters, and it's not something you have to do, it's something I personally do, it makes it easier for me. Typically I like to put like little runes or type of glyphs for each character, and it just helps identify a little easier for me who's who, because typically when I fill out my sheets, as you can see, everything is identical. The other thing that I do is, of course, I write that in pen in my attributes, and only the stuff that's going to change will be my stats, the bonuses, alignment, deity, anything that could possibly change for the character I put in pencil. Everything else I leave in pen. You don't have to, but that's something I personally do. I figured I would just share that real quick. So, and as I said, oh, didn't want to show that yet. Or that. Oh well. Anyways, this is what I'm going to be playing out of, which is the Princes of the Apocalypse, which is basically the Temple of Elemental Evil that has been reworked and a more comprehensive game system, if you will, and that's what I'm going to be getting into. So first thing when you use a module like this that you want to do is you're going to want to read it, and you don't want to spoil everything for yourself. You're going to be able to get a pretty decent grasp on it once you read through it to get the overall idea of how it's run, it's structured, and what areas of the book you're going to have to go to through the game to be able to reference the information that you need. And I have already marked all of those pages off with some sticky notes, so it just makes it quick to be able to flip to those areas. Now, with that being said, this module itself already has quite a few let me get to the back and show you the encounters that it incorporates into the system to be used, along with different types of weapons and magic items and so on and so forth. But above and beyond this, because my characters are first level, I decided to put in some of my own encounters using the monster manual. I did the same thing. I went through and I marked off the pages so it's just quickly referenced and I can go right to them rather than chasing a separate sheet of paper down to keep track of everything. So there's another little trick if you're doing solo RPG and you're just getting into this, that'll help you along, and it's one less thing you gotta chase down. So that makes it pretty simple. Now what I did with my encounters, and I'll see if I can hold this up to you, you really can't see that because of the light's not the best. You might be able to see that. So with my random encounters, what I did is I have 7 of them. 2 of them which I classified as common, and the rest of them as uncommon. Now I would roll a 1d6 for a random encounter, and on a 2, 4, 6 or the even I would have a common encounter, and on a odd or 1, 3, 5 I would have an uncommon that point I'm going to roll my percentage die for that, and it'll correspond over to this table here as to which encounter out of my monster manual my characters are going to encounter. Now, one other thing before I get into this I wanted to talk about was, so I made a warlock character class, and one of the things in the player's handbook is that you have to choose a deity that gives you kind of like a cleric. You kind of get divine spells, if you will, but they are granted through the power of this deity. So basically you have to have a pretty good explanation of your deity and the background of it. The examples they give you in the player's manual, they're good, but they're kind of vague. And so I didn't mind that too much, but I decided I just wanted something a little bit more in depth. Now, this is made by Palladium Books. It was written by Kevin Sambita and Matthew Clemens. It's called Garden of the Gods. Now, this is actually a whole entire system unto itself, but the thing I really like about this is I use this as source material, and it has a lot of really cool ideas and other things you can use for your games, particularly when it comes to your deities. So, which brought me to this guy right here, the Shadow of Lictalan, I guess how you would pronounce that, which basically it's a statue of mystery and an enigma even to the Fosserians who have studied it for centuries. Priests, psychics, and mystics who have attempted to commune with the deity report nothing, or that they sense only a faint echo of power. Most claim the statue is silent and dismissive of mortals, but others insist they have heard a single word, just a whisper, that could well be their imaginations if it did not repeat the same word every time. Zagalor. So reading on from there, and this is what gave me the good idea for the template to create the deity for my character. And just to give you an example out there. Now, this just recently was released. Kevin Sambita recently sent this to me. It's an excellent book. And like I said, even if you don't play Palladium, but you're just looking for a really good source material to be able to enhance whatever game system you're using, and you're looking for some really cool ideas, this is one you may want to look into investing into. And like I said, you don't have to use this just for Palladium Fantasy. As a matter of fact, you can use this as some source material and take some ideas out of there for your RPG. Okay, I think that's enough of that. The other thing I wanted to bring out, and this is a book I've had for quite a while. As a matter of fact, this came out when 3rd edition D&D was huge, and it's called the Crit-O-Nomicon. So, a guide to critical hits, fumbles, and magical mishaps. This is an extremely fun book, and well, it is exactly what you think it is. And a fumble, you roll on the chart, kind of it's a lot like the old Rollmaster, where you had the columns that you had to cross-reference, and it would tell you how much damage you did to your target, or if you missed, how bad things really were. This is kind of the same. I thought it might add some more flavor into the game. So this is something that I pulled off of my bookshelf, blew the dust off of, and decided to put back into circulation and use again. So this ought to be fun. And so let's get the ball rolling, and let's get the show going on the road.